One sentence from a 12-year-old girl left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. "You're my mom." Those words didn't just shock Judge Rebecca Hart. They shattered the carefully constructed walls she had built over the years. This story will make you question everything you thought you knew. What Lila revealed will change everything in an instant. Before we dive into this powerful story, I want to ask for a favor. If this story touches your heart, please give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one. And if you're moved, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Let's spread some love together. This is a story of a young girl named Lila and a moment in time where truth couldn't be hidden any longer. A story about motherhood, regret, and the unresolved pain of a past long buried. What happens when a child speaks the truth, not in anger or bitterness, but in the quiet hope of being seen? How do we handle the uncomfortable truth of a mistake that can never be undone? This is not just a courtroom drama. It's a moment of reckoning, of redemption, and ultimately of healing. But Lila's words were only the beginning. For her, this wasn't just a simple court case. It was the culmination of years of longing, of searching for a mother who had abandoned her. The truth was that Lila wasn't just pleading with the judge for understanding. She was pleading for a mother who had given her up before she even had the chance to know her. And now, in the very courtroom that once symbolized justice, Lila was about to turn the tide of her life with just 3 words. "You're my mom." How could such simple words have such power? And more importantly, how would Rebecca Hart, the judge, respond to this moment of raw, unfiltered truth? For Rebecca, sitting at the bench, the weight of the years, the career, and the carefully constructed walls she had built around herself were about to crumble. Her calm, unshaken demeanor began to falter. For the first time in her long career, she was faced with a question she didn't have an answer for. A question that had been buried so deep within her for years that she had almost forgotten it existed. What happens when the past you tried to bury comes rushing back? Rebecca had spent years controlling every part of her life. She had become a respected judge, a woman who could command a courtroom with a glance, with a word. But that all changed the moment Lila stood and made her declaration. The courtroom fell silent, as the words "You're my mom" echoed through the room, shattering the professional mask Rebecca had carefully crafted for decades. Lila was no longer just a young girl in trouble. She was the daughter Rebecca had abandoned, the child she had given away. And now, that child was asking her a question no mother ever wants to hear. "Why did you leave me?" This wasn't just a courtroom moment. It was the beginning of a journey. A journey where both mother and daughter would have to face the demons of their past, confront the choices they had made, and ultimately, decide whether forgiveness and understanding were possible. Could a mother and daughter, separated by years of pain, guilt, and uncertainty, find a way back to each other? Was it too late for Rebecca to be the mother Lila needed her to be? And for Lila, what does it mean when your mother is right in front of you, yet remains a stranger? Does she still have the right to ask for love and forgiveness? Can Rebecca, who had built a life on a lie, truly undo the damage done all those years ago? What happens when forgiveness seems impossible, yet is the only thing left? Stay with me because this story is about to take a turn that no one expected. It's about more than just a mother and daughter. It's about how the truth can be the most powerful force in the world. How the pain of the past can either break us or make us whole. How a single sentence spoken by a child can change the entire course of history. The unraveling of the past. The courtroom was still frozen in time. The air, thick with a heavy silence, hung over the proceedings as Lila stood, a quiet defiance in her small frame. Her words had shattered the routine of the day, and now everyone was waiting for the response that seemed to be stuck in the throat of Judge Rebecca Hart. The weight of those 3 words, "You're my mom," seemed to echo endlessly, as though the world itself was holding its breath. For Lila, this wasn't just a trial. It was her chance to make someone see her, to finally get the answer to a question that had plagued her for her entire life. Why wasn't I good enough for you? Rebecca's mind raced, spinning with memories she had worked so hard to bury. In the briefest of moments, her thoughts were flooded with the past she had locked away. The day she made the choice that would haunt her forever. She had been young, just 18 years old, terrified, and overwhelmed by the thought of becoming a mother. Her family had told her it was for the best. Give her up, Rebecca. She deserves more than you can offer. The day she signed the papers, she could still hear the quiet sound of her newborn daughter's cries as they took her away. Her heart had shattered in a way she couldn't understand at the time. She had believed back then that it was the best thing for Lila. But now, here Lila was, standing in front of her, asking a question that felt like a physical blow to Rebecca's chest. Why didn't you come for me? Rebecca's heart clenched at the sight of the girl standing there, so small and fragile, yet so full of the strength that Rebecca had never been able to find for herself. She could feel the years of pain, the weight of abandonment, all crashing down on her in that single moment. The years of her own carefully constructed facade, the persona of the unflappable judge, felt like they were slipping through her fingers. In her mind, she was still that frightened 18-year-old girl, wondering if she could ever be enough. And now, Lila's plea was a direct challenge to everything Rebecca had tried to convince herself was true. I was wrong, Rebecca whispered, the words escaping her mouth before she could even stop them. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough. The words, soft and full of raw emotion, reverberated through the courtroom like a shockwave. Lila's eyes, so full of pain and vulnerability, met hers. In that moment, it wasn't the judge speaking to a child. It wasn't a powerful figure making a ruling. It was a woman, just a woman, speaking to a child who was lost, who had been abandoned, who had never stopped hoping for the truth that Rebecca had denied her for years. Rebecca's voice faltered as she continued, I was scared, so scared. I thought I was protecting you. I thought it was better this way. She was speaking to Lila now, but her eyes were vacant, as if she were speaking to herself as much as to the girl before her. But I was wrong. I was too scared to face my mistakes. I thought I was giving you a better life, but all I did was, I left you. The room, which had been completely silent, was now filled with the soft sounds of stifled breaths. Some spectators wiped their eyes, others shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do with the immense emotion hanging in the air. But no one dared speak. No one dared interrupt the painful confession that was unfolding in front of them. They could feel the enormity of the moment, the weight of every word, every tear that had been held back for years, now being released in front of them. Lila's face softened, though the hurt never left her eyes. Her small hands, still gripping the table, trembled slightly. She was a child, only 12 years old, yet she had carried a burden for so long that it was hard to imagine her ever being free of it. She had built walls around her heart, walls that no child should ever need to construct, but walls that were necessary for survival in a world that had never given her a sense of security. You never came, Lila whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of her words. Why didn't you come? I waited. I waited for so long for you to find me. Rebecca swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. She could feel the tears welling up, but she fought to keep them at bay. She had spent years hiding behind her professional demeanor, convincing herself that her career was enough to compensate for the emptiness she carried inside. But in that moment, she realized it was never enough. Nothing she had achieved, nothing she had done, could erase the pain of what she had left behind. Her mind flashed back to the day she had signed the adoption papers, the moment she had given up her daughter, telling herself it was for the best. She had convinced herself that Lila would be better off with another family, a family that could give her everything Rebecca couldn't. But what if Lila had needed her? What if that was the one thing she couldn't give her daughter, herself? Rebecca's heart ached as she looked at the girl before her. She could see the pain in her eyes, the desperate yearning for something she had never had, a mother's love. I didn't know how to be a mother, Rebecca said, her voice trembling now. I was just a girl myself. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to give you the life you deserved. And so I ran. I ran away from you, from everything. The judge's gavel was nowhere in sight now. This wasn't about a legal decision anymore. This wasn't about a case. This was about two people, mother and daughter, facing each other for the first time and finally, for once, telling the truth. The reckoning and redemption. The air in the courtroom was suffocating. Every eye was locked on Rebecca, and every breath seemed to echo through the space. The weight of the moment pressed on her chest, threatening to crush her under its intensity. The public, the spectators, the courtroom staff, all were witnesses to a profound shift, a moment of truth unfolding in the space where justice was supposed to be served. But there was no clear-cut answer. No judgment could be passed in this moment. For Rebecca, this wasn't just a case. It wasn't just another hearing, another decision to be made. This was her life. Her past, her choices, her mistakes, all laid bare. And standing in front of her was the very person who had been the casualty of those choices. Rebecca wanted to speak, to explain herself, but the words were stuck in her throat. For years, she had kept herself distant from her past, hiding behind the mask of authority and professionalism she had worked so hard to build. But Lila's words had shattered that mask. For the first time in her life, Rebecca couldn't hide. She couldn't run, and she didn't want to anymore. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca whispered, the words trembling on her lips as they finally escaped the prison of her heart. I didn't know how to be there for you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. I was wrong." The courtroom fell even quieter. The judge's voice, usually so commanding, was now fragile. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, were filled with something far more complex. Regret, sorrow, but perhaps most of all, a deep yearning to make things right. Lila stood still, her small body tense, as though she too was holding her breath. She had waited for years to hear those words, but even now, they didn't seem enough. She wasn't angry, not in the way one might expect. Her anger had long since turned into something else, something deeper, more painful. "I waited for you," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper but cutting through the tension like a blade. "I waited, but you never came. I thought, maybe if I wasn't enough you wouldn't want me. But you never tried." The words hung in the air. They weren't accusations. They weren't shouts of anger. They were simply the painful truth that Lila had carried with her for too long. The truth that had been buried in the pit of her stomach, festering, never quite going away, even when she thought she could move on. All Lila had ever wanted was her mother. She had wanted Rebecca to come for her, to try to give her the love and the security she had been deprived of her whole life. Rebecca felt her chest tighten. The tears that she had fought so hard to keep hidden now flowed freely. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Lila's forgiveness or even her understanding. What Rebecca had expected was a confrontation, a demand for the truth. But Lila was offering something far more difficult to accept. Forgiveness. "I never stopped thinking about you," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not for a single day. But I was too scared to face what I had done. To face you." The truth was a heavy burden to bear. It had been easier to deny it, easier to pretend that everything was fine, that she had made the right choice. But deep down, Rebecca had known it wasn't the right choice. She had known, even as she built her career and her life, that something was missing. That something was Lila. And now, here she was, standing in front of her, the child she had abandoned, the child who had every right to ask why, and Rebecca had no answer. The silence between them was deafening. For the first time in years, Rebecca allowed herself to feel the weight of her past. The shame, the regret, the pain. All of it was real, and all of it had led her to this moment where she had to make a choice. A choice that would not just change Lila's life, but her own as well. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said again, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything I've put you through. You were never the problem. I was the one who wasn't enough for you. But I want to try, Lila. I want to try to be the mother you deserve." Lila stood there for a long moment, the tears streaming down her face now, as if the weight of her own unspoken emotions had been lifted. She had waited so long for these words, but now that they were finally spoken, she wasn't sure what to do with them. Could she forgive? Could she trust her mother, the woman who had left her without a second thought? The courtroom was silent as Rebecca's voice cracked again, barely audible. I want to be here for you now. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be the mother you need. Please, give me that chance. Lila's hands trembled as she wiped her tears, and then, for the first time, she took a deep breath. I just wanted you to say it, she whispered. I needed to know that you didn't forget about me. And in that moment, something shifted. The tension in the room, which had felt so thick, so suffocating, began to dissipate. It wasn't over. There was still much to be done, much to be repaired, but they had taken the first step toward healing. The unspoken walls between them, walls built over years of hurt and abandonment, began to crumble. Lila looked up at Rebecca, her eyes still filled with tears, but now there was something else in them, a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, Lila saw her mother not as a distant, unreachable figure, but as a woman who had made mistakes, yes, but was now trying to make them right. Rebecca's hands shook as she reached for Lila, her arms wrapping around the girl in a tight embrace. It wasn't perfect. There were no promises that everything would be easy, but for the first time there was hope. A hope that they could start again, that they could rebuild a relationship that had been broken for too long. I'm here now, Rebecca whispered, her voice filled with a determination she had never known before. I'm never letting you go again. Lila nodded, her small body relaxing in Rebecca's arms, feeling safe, feeling loved. For the first time in a long time, the path to redemption and new beginnings. After that pivotal moment in the courtroom, life seemed to move in slow motion for both Rebecca and Lila. The weight of their conversation, the confessions, the raw vulnerability they shared, continued to resonate in the air long after the courtroom had emptied. For Lila, it was as if a long-lost part of herself had been found, a piece of her heart that she had buried for years, now unearthed and ready to be healed. For Rebecca, the floodgates had been opened, and the guilt that had kept her anchored for so long finally had a place to go, into the arms of the very daughter she had abandoned. In the weeks following that emotional day, Rebecca found herself making changes that would ripple throughout her life. No longer satisfied with just her work as a judge, no longer willing to bury her past in the cold, sterile world of legal battles, she sought out Lila, not as a judge, but as a mother. And this time she was determined to do it right. Her new mission wasn't to preside over the courtroom with unshakable authority. It was to be there for Lila every step of the way, to give her the guidance, love, and support she so desperately needed. Rebecca made the difficult decision to file a formal petition for legal guardianship of Lila. She had no illusions about the process. It would be long, arduous, and filled with hurdles. But for the first time in her life, she was willing to face the fight. Not because of her career or because of a sense of duty, but because of Lila. Lila had become her responsibility now, and Rebecca wasn't going to let her down again. As Rebecca entered the family court for the petition hearing, her nerves were at an all-time high. The usually composed and authoritative judge was now someone deeply uncertain, questioning everything she had ever believed about herself. But as she sat across from Lila, she saw the same determination, the same strength she had seen in the courtroom weeks before. Lila was not a scared, abandoned child anymore. She was a young woman with a voice, no longer willing to shrink into the shadows of her pain. The court process wasn't easy. Lila, now 13, was still hesitant. She didn't fully trust the system, and she certainly didn't trust that Rebecca could be the mother she had always hoped for. But they both knew this was their chance. Rebecca's chance to prove herself, and Lila's chance to finally have the love and support she had been yearning for. Rebecca didn't rush Lila. She let her take the lead. The two of them spent countless hours talking, sharing meals, getting to know each other again. It wasn't perfect. There were times when Lila's guard went back up, when the wounds of the past resurfaced, but Rebecca didn't shy away. She stayed. She was patient, giving Lila the space to heal, but always there when Lila needed her, offering her unwavering support. One of the most poignant moments came when Rebecca attended Lila's first art showcase at the local community center. Lila, who had been drawing for years in secret, had finally decided to show her work to the world. Rebecca stood in the back of the room, heart pounding in her chest as she watched Lila's drawings. Each one a piece of her heart, a representation of her pain, her hope, and her longing. The paintings were beautiful in their simplicity. They captured a mother's love, something that Lila had been denied for so long. The love that Rebecca had been too scared to give. As Rebecca wandered among the artworks, her eyes fell on a piece that caught her breath. It was a painting of a mother holding her child in a warm, protective embrace. The love was palpable in every brushstroke, every color that enveloped the figures. Rebecca stood still, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Lila appeared at her side, her eyes soft, and her voice barely above a whisper. "I made this one for you." It wasn't a simple piece of art. It was an offering, a chance for Rebecca to finally see what Lila had always wanted from her. The love, the connection, the reassurance. Rebecca's heart swelled, and in that moment, she realized that Lila had always been waiting for her. She had always hoped. It was something Rebecca had taken for granted until now. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking as she reached for the painting. "Thank you for waiting." But Lila's smile, though small, was full of understanding. She didn't need to say anything more. She had waited for years, but now, with Rebecca standing by her side, the waiting was over. The new chapter, the bridge between the past and future. As weeks passed, the bond between Rebecca and Lila grew stronger. It wasn't easy. There were moments of silence, of hesitation, and of fear. But there were also moments of joy, of shared laughter, of simple days spent together, getting to know one another as mother and daughter. Rebecca continued the legal process, and when the day came for the official ruling, it wasn't just a victory for Rebecca. It was a victory for Lila as well. The judge's decision to grant Rebecca legal guardianship wasn't just a legal matter. It was a promise. A promise that Rebecca would be there for Lila in every way she could. That she would be the mother Lila had always needed. The journey wasn't over, but Rebecca had taken the first step. She had opened her heart to Lila, and in doing so, she had begun to rebuild what had once been broken. There would still be challenges ahead. Guilt, fear, and doubt would occasionally creep in, but for the first time, Rebecca didn't let them control her. She had found something more powerful than perfection. She had found love, forgiveness, and a commitment to healing, not just for Lila, but for herself. And in that quiet moment, when Rebecca stood by Lila's side, watching her daughter's art displayed for the world to see, Rebecca knew that she had found her purpose. Not in the courtroom, not in delivering justice, but in being the mother Lila had always deserved. The unspoken connection and the unraveling of walls. As time went on, Rebecca and Lila began to forge an unspoken connection. One that didn't require words but was understood through small gestures and shared moments. The hurt from the past, while still lingering, became less about regret and more about the new journey they were on together. Rebecca, now more attuned to Lila's needs, found herself becoming more and more involved in her life. It wasn't just about visiting her at the community center or spending time at family dinners. Rebecca was beginning to immerse herself in the small details, learning what made Lila laugh, discovering the little things that made her unique. The art showcase had been a huge turning point. But after that day, when Lila had shared her deepest fears and dreams through art, things began to change. Rebecca recognized that her role wasn't just about trying to fix things. It was about being present, being a constant force of support, and truly listening when Lila needed it the most. It wasn't an easy road, and there were times when Lila pushed her away, retreating into the walls she had built to protect herself. But for the first time, Rebecca understood that those walls were a natural defense, something she too had used in her own life to protect her heart from the harsh truths of the past. The difference now was that Rebecca was no longer running away. She stayed, no matter how difficult or painful it became. They spent long nights sitting together in Rebecca's office, with Lila recounting the stories of her foster homes, the good and the bad. Every story revealed another layer of Lila's past, another piece of the puzzle that Rebecca had missed in her absence. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was necessary. And each time Lila shared a piece of herself, Rebecca's understanding grew deeper, her resolve to be the mother she had promised to be stronger. a new foundation built on trust and love. One of the most crucial moments came when Lila faced another court hearing regarding her future. She was a teenager now, and while things had changed between her and Rebecca, the legal system still had to finalize the arrangements. Lila stood before the judge, her once fragile frame now a little taller, a little stronger. The hurt she had carried for years was still there, but it no longer defined her. And as she stood there, with Rebecca in the room, something changed. Lila realized that her story wasn't over, that her voice mattered, that she could have a say in her future. Rebecca, too, had to confront the reality of her past and present. She had long ago buried the memories of the choice she made when she was just a teenager. But in order to truly heal, she had to look at them squarely. She had to forgive herself for the mistakes she had made and understand that her past didn't define her future. Lila was the key to that future, and every moment with her was a chance to rewrite their story. As the hearing concluded and Lila was granted a stable, permanent living arrangement with Rebecca, the emotions in the room were palpable. This wasn't just another case. This was a mother and daughter choosing each other, despite all the brokenness and hurt they had been through. Rebecca knew it wouldn't always be easy, but she was committed to being the mother Lila had longed for. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca and Lila moved into a new home together. It was a modest house, nothing extravagant, but it was theirs. It was a fresh start, a place where Lila could finally unpack her belongings, a place where she could feel safe and loved. And in the quiet of the evenings, when they shared their favorite meals or talked about the mundane moments of their day, Rebecca realized that it wasn't the grand gestures or perfect answers that made them a family. It was the small, everyday moments of connection, trust, and love. Lila began to show Rebecca things she had never shared with anyone before. Her journal, her artwork, her dreams. Slowly, Rebecca started to realize that being a mother wasn't about being perfect. It was about being there, really there, for her child when they needed her most. A family reborn, the final lesson. The story of Rebecca and Lila was one of transformation, of two people who had been scarred by choices, by pain, by abandonment, and who had found their way back to one another through courage, resilience, and an unyielding commitment to healing. Their journey together wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, fear, and hurt. But in the end, it was clear that love, forgiveness, and the willingness to grow and change were the forces that allowed them to rebuild what had been broken. And while Rebecca had thought she was offering Lila a second chance, it was Rebecca who found the true redemption. She had spent years in a prison of guilt, telling herself she was unworthy of being a mother. But through Lila's forgiveness, her art, and her unspoken strength, Rebecca found her own way out of that prison. This was the ultimate lesson, the power of second chances. Not just for Lila, but for Rebecca as well. In choosing to face her past, to confront her mistakes, and to finally open her heart to the daughter she had abandoned, Rebecca learned that the true meaning of family wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for one another, even when the world around you is falling apart. As the sun set on their new home, with Lila by her side and the promise of a future filled with love and understanding, Rebecca finally felt at peace. They had both found what they had been searching for all along, each other. Rebecca and Lila's story is one of healing, forgiveness, and the bond between mother and daughter that transcends time and mistakes. In a world that often prioritizes achievement and success, this journey reminds us that the most important thing in life is love and the courage to face our past and make amends. Through their experiences, both Rebecca and Lila discovered that family isn't about perfection. It's about being present, supporting one another, and always choosing to love, even in the most difficult of circumstances. This story isn't just about one woman and one child. It's a story that resonates with anyone who has ever been broken, lost, or unsure of their place in the world. It's a reminder that it's never too late to start over, to heal, and to choose love over fear.